The Tigers have won one series all year long against the Baltimore Orioles. It's time to win another series, and this is the time to do it. No more of the excuses. Everybody's dealing with injuries. It's time to put up or it's time to shut up. But that's going to lead me to the final thing that I want to discuss tonight, and that is, what is wrong with the Tigers? We came into the season on other shows that we have here at Detroit Sports Nation. We've talked about the Tigers, specifically straight shooting, that I have hosted with one of our co-hosts, Matt Bass. And we talked about the Tigers, especially during the lockout and as the season got started. And one of the things that we talked about and said is this needs to be a 500 or a few games above 500 club. And right now, they're 13 games under 500. They are on pace to score less runs this year than they did in 2003. In fact, former player Joel Zamaya threw a Facebook post or an Instagram post up, a social media post, we'll just call it that, right? Up today, criticizing the Detroit Tigers, specifically their front office. It's an article that you can find on Detroit Sports Nation. But there's a lot of blame to be placed. Yes, one, we look at the construction of a roster. The roster has been built around arms, and guess what? Those arms are doing well. But you cannot win baseball games if you do not score runs. And according to Fangraphs, if you look at the team's overall offensive stats, the Tigers rank dead last offensively in the MLB. They are not a good offensive ball club. They're striking out about 24-25% of the time, which is not going to bode well. Earlier in the week, they had a hard hit rate of under 35%. Now, hard hit rate is measured at balls that leave the bat at 95 miles per hour or higher. And the Tigers are doing that less than 35% of the time, which means they're not barreling up baseballs. They're not making contact very often with baseballs because they're striking out a ton. And it can go back to the way that the roster is constructed and the man that has constructed that roster. Nobody complains that we drafted Casey Mize. No problem with it, because Mize is going to be phenomenal. And we've seen him be phenomenal, and we wish him a speedy recovery. But when you continue to load up on arms in the draft and you fail to load up on offensive bats, you get the problem that we have now. Again, going back to the way the roster is constructed, I love Javi Baez. I love watching him play defense. He's a great defensive shortstop. He makes the crazy plays and then makes the routine plays a little odd sometimes. I understand that, and you have to understand that when he comes to your team. But the one thing that is the most obvious thing is his approach at the plate, and Javi's timing and the way that he is approaching his at-bats is not going to help this team. He's clearly pressing. Anybody that's hitting around 200 and has signed a deal that he signed in the offseason is going to be pressing, and Javi's got to relax. But I go back to the way the roster is constructed. I go back to Alavila. You've built all these arms in the system. Great job. They're performing. But you have not built a team because you have holes in your lineup. And the one but the one free agent that you went after in the offseason is a notorious free swinger. Now, you made a trade, Isaac Paredes, for great trade on the surface. Meadows obviously dealing with a medical condition, and we wish him the speediest of recoveries as well because we need him in our lineup. But Meadows also is only around a 260 to 280 hitter. We have not put people in our lineup that can make contact with the ball, get on base, and draw walks, hit the gaps, hit singles. And it's starting to rear its head of how this roster has actually been constructed. It's a problem. What's wrong with the Tigers is the way the roster's been constructed. And I don't mean to be hopeless, because I, of all people, tend to be an eternal optimist when it comes to the Detroit Tigers. I had them at or above 500 to begin the season. I still believe that they're going to turn a corner and be closer to 500 this year than they are farther away. I mean, even took a bet with somebody that they're not going to lose 90 games this season. I'm an eternal optimist. I get in arguments about how in the next 10 years the Tigers are going to win more than the White Sox, and winning is abroad. I will always back the Tigers and hope for the best with the Tigers. But we also have to be realistic. We have to be realistic in the fact that this team right now is not playing well, specifically because they're not hitting well. Now, I don't know if you saw the YouTube broadcast of the finale in Minnesota, but it was the free game of the day on YouTube TV, and the play-by-play guy had made a statement that Detroit's magic number is 3, because in games when they score 3 or more runs, they're actually, now that they beat Minnesota in the finale, 14-7. But when they score less than 3 runs, well, we know what their record is. They're 1-21, which is not great. Not great. So the Tigers, what's wrong with the Tigers? They suck at hitting. That's what's wrong with the Tigers. If they want to turn the corner, they've got to get to a better approach at the plate. They have to be more disciplined. They have to look to draw walks. But has their roster been constructed by the GM with player profiles that have good approaches, that draw walks, that put the bat to ball? I know Candelario gets a lot of flack for his slow starts and his streakiness, but he is one of our more disciplined hitters. He has longer at-bats, and yes, he strikes out, but he also pops up. I get that, but he also has a really good gap-to-gap approach when it comes to hitting. For the Detroit Tigers, this is going to be a big weekend, because after these 4 games with the the Cleveland Guardians, they then again host the Minnesota Twins. That is, I think, 15 games in the last 2 weeks against 2 teams, because Rob Manfred and his schedulers are just Mensa, okay? But this is a big weekend, because you can build momentum going into a series early next week with the Minnesota Twins that could set you up to turn the corner. And we're not looking for a wild card. We're not looking for a World Series right now. We're not even looking for, let's say, even above 500 baseball. All we're looking for is be competitive. What can the Tigers do to get as close to 500 as possible this season? Well, it starts with their approach at the plate. It starts with getting the right players in the lineup that have the right approach at the plate so that they can put runs on the board, and so the pitching staff that has been constructed and is performing well, including the bullpen, which we never thought we would say in Detroit, can continue to hold those runs from the opposing team down. And if our runs start going up and their runs start going down, it does not take a rocket scientist to see how the corner will be turned. Now,
man on a mission, I'ma get it. You know I be on a what?